the Healy Administration Siting Board. So welcome to all the new members. As many of you know, I have a long history with this board, first as a private attorney appearing before it and later as the director. And I have tremendous respect for the work of the board and its staff. And I will say to the new board members, this is challenging but very important work. The board's work is guided by the Siting Board statute. And as the case before us today demonstrates, that statute really was designed for a different time, a time when the power system was based on large fossil fuel power plants owned by utilities. And today we live in a very different world. First, our power system includes distributed generation. Power can flow in two directions. Anyone can produce power. Second, we have a mandate to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. This means we'll be building and siting thousands of megawatts of renewable generation and the infrastructure that supports it. Third, we've rejected the pattern of the past where power plants were built on the backs of marginalized communities. Instead, today, we're committed to ensuring that all communities share in the responsibilities and benefits of our clean energy transition. Finally, we know that because the work of this board impacts not just developers building infrastructure, but neighbors and the public at large, it's imperative that we be transparent and inclusive. So I would say as a board, we have some repairing to do. And as a state, we have some thinking to do about the role of this board. And that's why I have established a commission on permitting and siting to look hard at questions around building a large amount of renewables and how we'll do that consistent with our land use and equity principles. This commission that will include a wide range of viewpoints will look at the Siting Board statute and make recommendations such as whether its jurisdiction should be expanded to cover renewables such as storage or facilities less than 100 megawatts. I also recognize the need for permitting agencies such as this board to deliver efficient and consistent service. That's why I have asked all the EEA agencies to look at their permitting processes, and this includes permitting timelines and the factors necessary to shorten them. So I am looking forward to working with all of you and stakeholders on these very important issues. So today's meeting concerns two proposed battery energy storage systems in two separate dockets. Cranberry Point Energy Storage LLC, that's EFSB 21-02, DPU 22-59, and Medway Grid LLC, that's EFSB 22-02 and DPU 22-18 and 19. The Siting Board provided notice of today's meeting to the service list for these dockets and to community-based organizations and other interested people on April 26, when the tentative decision was issued for comment. In addition, notice of this board meeting was provided consistent with the open meeting law. So the purpose of today's meeting is to listen to comments, deliberate, and vote on whether to approve with conditions or amendments, or reject the two tentative decisions issued by the Siting Board staff in these cases. The tentative decision for Cranberry Point and Medway Grid focus on a single, common, and narrow question. Does the Siting Board have the statutory authority under the existing siting statute to approve or reject battery energy storage systems? The tentative decisions do not address the merits of these projects themselves. Under the recommended tentative decisions, they find that under the Siting Board statute as it exists today, the Siting Board does not have jurisdiction over these battery energy storage systems. That doesn't mean that there'll be no review of these projects, because in addition to Siting Board approval, the petitioners have asked the DPU to issue zoning exemptions. Thus, under the tentative decision, the DPU will now determine whether to issue zoning exemptions. So I'll spend a minute and introduce and welcome the other members of the Energy Facility Siting Board participating in today's meeting. So first is Jamie Van Nostrum, Chair of the Department of Public Utilities, Cecile Frazier, Commissioner of the Department of Public Utilities, Elizabeth Mahoney, Commissioner of the Department of Energy Resources, Bonnie Heipel, Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection, Jonathan Costco, General Counsel and Designee for Secretary Howe of the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development, Crystal Johnson, Public Member, and Brian Casey, Public Member. Just to note that another public member was not able to attend today. Andy Green, the Director of the Siding Board, will be serving as our host, along with the other staff of the Siding Board. Before we begin the substance of the meeting, I'll provide some important information about how we'll be conducting the meeting. So the Siding Board meeting today is being held remotely using Zoom. This meeting is being recorded and will be available on the Siding Board's YouTube channel. This meeting is being conducted remotely pursuant to the Massachusetts Open Meeting Law, the Siding Board regulations, and recent legislation allowing the continuation of remote public meetings via video conferencing. If you're having difficulty participating, please call or text 857-200-0065 for assistance at any time. So some important procedures. All board members must be able to hear each other and the audience. If a board member becomes disconnected, we'll note that on the record. And if there are significant technical difficulties, we'll stop the meeting to allow the problem to be resolved. The stenographer is participating remotely and will transcribe everything said to make an official record of the meeting. Board members and other speakers should mute their audio when listening and unmute when speaking. Everyone should speak slowly and clearly, and allow the prior speaker to finish before you begin to speak. These procedures will help ensure an accurate transcript of the meeting. So the sequence of the meeting is going to go as follows. 1, we're going to listen to comments from public officials, then presentations from the Siding Board presiding officer and general counsel, followed by comments from the parties and participants in each proceeding, and then public commenters. And 2, the board will then begin deliberations on the tentative decision, consider possible amendments to the tentative decision, and finally vote on the tentative decision. Because the jurisdictional question is the same in both dockets, we are going to hear from presenters and commenters in both cases before the board begins its deliberations. If you'd like to present comments to the Siding Board today, you will hopefully have pre-registered. If you haven't pre-registered, we'll do our best to accommodate you. So please raise your hand in the Zoom at the bottom of your screen. And for those of you who are dialing in, you can let us know if you'd like to comment by dialing *9. Public commenters are asked to keep their comments to 3 minutes per person so that we can hear from everyone who wishes to speak. We'll gently remind speakers when it's time to wrap up about 30 seconds before the 3-minute mark, and then again at the 3 minutes. Public officials who comment will have additional times as needed. We're now ready to begin the substantive portion of the meeting. Okay, let me begin by calling on elected or appointed public officials who have signed up to speak regarding the tentative decision. If we have anybody here.
We have not had any public officials pre-registered to speak, but if there are any present, as the secretary mentioned, please use the raise hand icon or *9 if you're dialing in.
Whoa, yikes. Okay.
Mr. Boyden, I believe we'll be taking Medway Grid as a party momentarily, so perhaps if we could take your comments in just a moment or two.
That'd be perfect.
Okay. All right. So I think we're going to move to the presiding officer. Is that right?
Yes.
So I would ask presiding officers Donna Sharkey and Robert Shea and EFSB General Counsel Joan Forrester Evans to present the tentative decision, and then we'll take questions from the board after they have spoken. So, thank you.
Good morning, Secretary Tepper and members of the Siding Board. My name is Donna Sharkey, and I am the presiding officer in this matter related to Cranberry Point. I'm here to present the staff's tentative decision regarding the Cranberry Point Energy Storage Project and to answer any questions you may have regarding this proceeding. We are here before you to address a limited legal issue which affects the Cranberry Point project and another proposed battery storage project, Medway Grid, as identified in the notices for this board meeting. First, I'd like to summarize the procedural details for the Cranberry Point project as it's been presented in the combined docket EFSB 21-02 and DPU 22-59. On August 27, 2021, pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 164, Section 69J and a quarter, Cranberry Point filed a petition for approval to construct a battery energy storage system, a new substation, ancillary electrical equipment, and a new Eversource-owned switching station. On May 11th, 2022, pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 3, the company filed a petition for a comprehensive exemption from the operation of the Town of Carver's zoning bylaws with the Department of Public Utilities. The chair of the department referred the zoning exemption request to the Siting Board for adjudication. As described in the tentative decision, the Siting Board conducted 2 public comment hearings in November 2021 and July 2022. The Siting Board granted petitions to intervene to save the Pine Barrens and Eversource, and granted limited participant status to 11 local residents: Melissa Ferretti, Nancy Ryan, Mary Dormer, Donna Farini, Daniel Farini, John D'Angelo, Patricia D'Angelo, Patricia Anderson, James Anderson, Gisela Hayes, and Alan Hayes. The project would include the construction of a 150 megawatt, 300 megawatt hour battery energy storage system with lithium iron phosphate battery models built into approximately 82 individual enclosures. The project will be located on a 6-acre parcel of land at 31R Main Street, Carver, Mass., adjacent to the existing Eversource substation and transmission right-of-way. Cranberry Point has stated the project has a capacity supply obligation with ISO New England requiring the project to be available by June 2024. Siting Board staff conducted 3 days of evidentiary hearings in October 2022, during which Cranberry Point and Save the Pine Barrens presented witnesses and responded to questions from the Siting Board staff and other parties. Initial briefs were filed on November 22nd and reply briefs on December 13th, 2022. Comments on the tentative decision were filed on May 5th by Cranberry Point and Save the Pine Barrens. The Siting Board also received written comments from New Leaf Energy, an energy company that is not a party or limited participant in this proceeding. Ms. Evans will address these comments in her presentation. The tentative decision presented to you today is limited in its scope to the issue of the Siting Board's statutory jurisdiction to review the proposed petition filed by Cranberry Point for review and approval of the proposed battery energy storage project. The tentative decision concludes the Siting Board does not have jurisdiction over the project and dismisses the Siting Board proceeding. The tentative decision also would send the department dockets back to the department for adjudication. The companion tentative decision for Medway Grid, also identified in the notice for this board meeting, is similarly limited to that issue. Robert Shea, the presiding officer for that docket, will address the procedural details for the Medway Grid proceeding next. Then our general counsel, Joan Foster Evans, will address the common issue related to the Siting Board's statutory authority addressed in both tentative decisions and respond to any questions or comments related to the jurisdictional issue. Next, Robert Shea will make his presentation as presiding officer for Medway Grid.
Thank you, Ms. Sharkey. Good morning, Secretary Tepper and members of the Siting Board. My name is Robert Shea, and I am the presiding officer for the Medway Grid Battery Energy Storage System proceeding. Andrew Green, Joan Foster Evans, and Wayne Wong are also on the case team for this project. I will summarize the substance of the petitions filed in this consolidated case, and I will briefly describe the project. Following my presentation, Joan Foster Evans, our general counsel, will address the jurisdictional issue, which is the legal issue common to both cases and the subject of the tentative decisions. This proceeding, the Medway Grid proceeding, is a consolidation of 3 petitions filed by Medway Grid LLC on February 5th, 2022. One of these petitions was filed with the Siting Board, and 2 of them were filed with the department. All 3 petitions have been consolidated by order of the department chair and referred to the Siting Board for adjudication. The Siting Board petition was brought under General Laws, Chapter 164, Section 69J and a quarter, which pertains to the Siting Board's Generating Facility Approval Authority. This petition seeks Siting Board approval to construct a battery energy storage system, which is known as BESS, and ancillary facilities and a new project substation. Medway Grid proposes to construct a BESS with a storage capacity of 500 megawatt hours and a maximum discharge rate of 250 megawatts. In addition, the company also wants to construct a transmission interconnection linking the project substation to the nearby existing Eversource West Medway substation. The project would be located in Medway, Massachusetts, immediately south of Milford Street, which is also Route 109. The Siting Board staff conducted a virtual public comment hearing on July 13th, 2022. There were 3 interveners in this proceeding. The town of Medway and Eversource are interveners. The other intervener is an unincorporated association composed of local residents entitled Medway Enumerated Parties. Furthermore, Mr. Charles Myers is a limited participant. The board staff conducted evidentiary hearings in February of 2022. The town of Medway has executed a host community agreement with the company. We note that the project has a capacity supply obligation from ISO New England, requiring that the project be available by June 2024. We issued the tentative decision to the parties on Wednesday, April 26, 2023. The tentative decision would dismiss the Siting Board petition for lack of jurisdiction. The zoning exemption petition and the Section 72 petition would be sent back to the department for decision. And now I'll turn the mic over to Ms. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Shea and Ms. Sharkey. Good morning, Secretary Tepper and the rest of the members of the Siting Board. My name is Joan Foster Evans, and I am the General Counsel of the Siting Board. And I will address, as the previous 2 speakers said, I will address the jurisdictional portion of this presentation this morning. Now that the Cranberry Point and Medway Grid proceedings are fully briefed, the issue of the board's jurisdiction over a battery energy storage system, which I will refer to as BESS, is squarely before us for the first time in a Section 69J and a quarter proceeding. The 2 developers of the projects under review argue that the siting statutes, together with the definitions stated in General Laws, Chapter 164, Section 1, could be interpreted to include BESS review within the Siting Board's authority over generating facilities. In addition, the developers note that each BESS acts like a generating facility and is treated as generation by ISO New England. And therefore, the Siting Board should give the BESS comparable treatment. Interveners argue that employing the rules of statutory construction, it is clear that the Siting Board does not have authority to review and approve BESS projects. Some interveners argue that BESS do not actually generate or produce electricity and therefore cannot be considered generation. I'd like to note that BESS act in multiple roles on the electric system. BESS can absorb energy and then release it to the grid at a later time, looking much like a generating facility. ISO New England rules recognize the ability to provide capacity and energy to the grid, and consequently, ISO New England has awarded capacity supply obligations to both projects. BESS have been installed in Massachusetts as distribution assets, such as the BESS on Nantucket and in Provincetown. ISO New England is exploring the idea that BESS can act as transmission assets and is seeking FERC approval of its tariffs for specific types of installations. And Massachusetts has recognized the important contributions of BESS with aggressive energy storage installation goals. These projects, if built, would be important steps toward realizing those storage goals. In determining whether the siting board has jurisdiction over BESS, the board must start with a review of the authority provided by the legislature in our enabling statutes. The siting board's authority is defined by types of facilities. The legislature listed specific types of facilities which are to be included in the siting board's review. This is different than the type of authority, say, given to the Department of Public Utilities, which has, among other things, certain general supervisory authority over some organizations, such as electric companies. Siting staff looked for explicit authority over BESS in the siting statutes and did not find that BESS are listed as energy facilities over which we have statutory authority. We then looked to our statutes, to our other statutes, to determine whether BESS might be included as a category or type of energy infrastructure, included as part of the types of facilities that are listed in the siting statutes. In particular, we looked at our authority over generating facilities. The developers in these proceedings maintain that because BESS act in times as generation, they should be treated as generating facilities. However, the siting statutes do not define generating. Reference to generating facility statute for clues as to what might be included in the definition of generating and review of other siting statutes for treatment of the concept of storage did not yield a clear answer of whether BESS should be considered generating units and therefore subject to our review. Indeed, even today, the question of whether older, more established forms of energy storage facilities, such as pumped hydroelectric facilities, fit the statutory definition of generating facility has not been resolved. Consistent with the methods of statutory construction and siting board precedent, staff referred to the definitional section of Chapter 164, which is Section 1, which applies to the siting board, except where our statutes indicate otherwise. Section 1 includes definitions for both generation and energy storage systems. The definitions provided in Section 1 indicate that generation and energy storage systems involve different processes. The legislature did not treat storage as a subset of generation. While one could argue that BESS transform energy, which is part of the Section 1 definition of generation, there is a separate statutory definition of energy storage systems, which is distinct from generation. The siting board was created in 1973, clearly before the arrival of the type of BESS proposed here. In 1977, as a result of the Electric Restructuring Act, the legislature created a separate review regime for generating units. But viable BESS projects, such as those before us, were still years away. Even when the legislature recently updated Chapter 164 in 2016 to include the definition of energy storage systems as large BESS projects were then beginning to be contemplated, The legislature still did not address siting board jurisdiction, nor state the siting board should review best projects. Even the most recent energy laws enacted by the legislature, the Act Driving Clean Energy and Offshore Wind from 2022, or the Climate Roadmap Act from 2021, do not address siting board jurisdiction over BESS. If the legislature determines that state oversight of BESS siting would be advantageous, it can provide that authority and identify the parameters of that authority. The siting board can only act in the areas where the legislature has delegated authority to do so. A thorough review of statutes defining the siting board's scope of authority indicates the legislature did not so delegate that power. This conclusion by staff does not judge whether the siting board should review BESS, or whether such a review would assist or hinder Massachusetts in attaining its energy storage goals. It would be helpful for the legislature to address whether siting board jurisdiction over BESS is appropriate. Nor do the tentative decisions before you state whether these particular projects should or shouldn't be approved. That analysis and determination on whether the projects qualify for zoning exemptions is left to the department. The tentative decisions conclude that the siting board does not have jurisdiction over BESS and should dismiss the petitions to construct for lack of subject matter jurisdiction. Again, this is not a reflection of the merits of the proposal for the department zoning exemptions. I would like to now address two matters that were raised in the comments on the tentative decisions. First, the attorney for the developers questioned the timing of the board's action on BESS jurisdiction. While we appreciate that the petitioners did not anticipate a decision from the siting board regarding jurisdiction at this time, staff feel that this matter is ripe for decision and decisions should issue now. Staff note that the question of how to treat siting of BESS projects in Massachusetts is a complicated one. When the original owner of Cranberry Point filed for determination of jurisdiction, it argued against siting board jurisdiction. We received comments and legal arguments in that proceeding that went both ways, both for and against jurisdiction, including by the two major transmission companies in Massachusetts here. They went opposite directions. In the determination of jurisdiction proceeding, staff issued discovery and received discovery that could be applied to both arguments. In particular, we explored the technical aspects of how BESS function, how BESS stores energy in a chemical form and converts it back into electricity when discharged, which is somewhat analogous to virtually most forms of electric generation that inherently transforms some sort of energy into electricity. We also explored, policy considerations. Would siting board review of BESS be beneficial and fit our general agency mission? These very policy considerations were reflected in comments recently received on staff's tentative decision. Cranberry Point eventually changed owners, and the new owners decided to withdraw the determination of jurisdiction in favor of filing for approval to construct under our generating facility statute. As a result of changing zoning bylaws in Carver, Cranberry Point decided to make a second filing to seek comprehensive zoning exemption, and we were required to repeat the public portion of the proceeding. We note that the changing nature of local bylaws highlights the difficulty in permitting BESS on the local level, and that local permitting in Carver is ongoing even now. Ultimately, only after the proceedings were complete in Cranberry Point and Medway Grid, and the facts relating to BESS fully adjudicated, and the question of jurisdiction fully briefed, did staff see that the question of jurisdiction remained contested and required immediate board consideration. Because jurisdiction is fundamentally a statutory question, staff drafted the tentative decision before you, focusing on assessing the authority given to the board through its statutes. The second point I would like to address is what happens after the board votes today. If the board were to adopt the tentative decisions as drafted, as indicated in the tentative decision, the zoning and section 72 matters would be sent back to the department for decision. The department plans to issue several documents with the final decisions. The documents will identify how the department plans to complete the proceedings. The department plans to require notice of the fact that the proceedings are now before the department. The department also plans to recognize and incorporate the records already established by the siting board. In addition, the department will recognize the existing parties and limited participants from the siting board proceedings and set a date to allow for supplemental briefing by parties and limited participants. Obviously, I cannot speak for the commissioners at the department, but staff recognize the need to complete the proceedings so that the department may make its decisions in a timely manner. Thank you for listening to our three presentations, and staff would be glad now to answer any questions you might have.
So if a board member has a question, just put up your hand. Is that what we do, Andy?
Yes.
Put up your hand.
Yes.
Well, I have one question. Can you what is the status of the Carver permitting?
I think that Ms. Sharkey might be able to give us some information. And I think also perhaps Mr. Kaplan might be able to give even more up-to-date information to us. But Ms. Sharkey,
Mr. Kaplan,
could you give us whatever information we have? Cannot hear you.
I don't know if Ms. Sharkey is talking, but I can't hear her.
The most recent information we have is as of April 24th, at which time the company was still pursuing, among other things, its special permit request for an extension of the special permit that already was awarded by the town of Carver. I believe that since that date, there have been subsequent incidents that have occurred, but that are not before us on the record right now. And Mr. Kaplan may be able to address that.
fair enough. Okay. Anybody else have questions for the EFSB staff?
Commissioner Fraser has her hand raised.
Commissioner Fraser, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the presiding officers and General Counsel Foster Evans. Just a quick follow-up for clarification. You mentioned that the DPU has general supervisory authority over entities that it regulates. Could you just touch on that again with respect to the siting board's jurisdiction? Thank you.
Sure, I'd be glad to answer that question. So the siting board does not have the same kind of general supervisory authority over entities that the department does. I mean, obviously the department has wide-ranging numbers of statutes and types of authorities, but one of the authorities is a general supervisory authority over particular entities, where the board's authority is not so much over entities, it is over facilities. And that's how this legislature has granted us authority to review certain types of facilities, like generating facilities or certain types of transmission lines, certain types of gas pipelines or storage.
Thank you for that clarification. I have nothing further at this point, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Mahaney.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just reacting or questioning some of the explanation from Ms. Foster Evans. You noted that the definition of energy storage was added to the statute in 2016. Has the EFSB or staff had any communications with the legislature since 2016 to explore whether or not that definition would apply to the work of this board? That's almost 7 years ago.
So as a general matter, the board staff don't communicate directly with the legislature on these kinds of matters. It would be a matter of whether the administration wanted to support some type of legislation to change the board's jurisdictional reach. And it sounds as if possibly the Secretary's office may wish to do that coming up in the future, but that has not been done at this point in time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair Tepper. Thanks for the excellent work by our presiding officers and General Counsel on the Council's office on these jurisdictional issues. Both the tentative decisions make a reference to the fact that ISO New England might be changing their tariffs in order to classify these types of facilities as transmission assets. I know we take the position in the tentative decisions that how ISO New England treats them is not really dispositive, but would that change the analysis at all if ISO New England filed those tariff provisions with FERC and treated these facilities as transmission assets?
So I think the general answer is probably not, because again, how ISO defines or treats a particular asset is not dispositive of how the legislature gives us authority. I don't know if there would be other impacts of that type of decision by FERC to approve that ISO tariff to treat the assets as transmission. But I think that it would not change our analysis. However, it's hard to guess at that without seeing the actual tariff and seeing the actual language involved.
Well,
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I don't know, even if you called it transmission, the way that the siting board jurisdiction works with respect to transmission is sort of about how long it is, how long the line is, what kind of rating it is. So it would be I think it would be difficult to shove it into the siting board definition of transmission.
I agree, and it just as it was hard. It was trying to fit it into the definition of generating units. It really is kind of its own entity. And should the legislature look to give us any kind of authority over BESS, we might recommend that it be given its separate statute and dealt with it separately. Is kind of the way hydroelectric systems have their own statute, and it's separate from generation or transmission.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Costco.
Yes, thank you. My question is, if the legislature does not enact its own, additional legislation to address this issue, what impact does this decision have on the Commonwealth's ability to meet its GHG reduction targets for 2030, for 2050? Like, what is the significance of this decision generally beyond these two projects?
I think that's a good question. I think that, I think that is a question that might go to the developers, but let me just say that I think it cuts both ways. Some developers may prefer not to come through the process of the siting board, and that makes the process shorter as far as state permitting, because where a facility is jurisdictional of the siting board, a developer cannot commence construction until they have that approval. So, and also no other state permits can issue until the siting board issues its approval. Therefore, those restrictions would go away with if the board adopts these tentative decisions. And so that might be a benefit to best developers. But on the negative side is if the best developers cannot come through the siting board, they cannot get a certificate to override local approvals, and they would have to focus on getting their approvals from a local matter. So I think the decision cuts both ways.
I'd also note that the siting board jurisdiction only applies regardless to anything over 100 megawatts. So it's the bigger facilities that would be implicated. But I think Joan is right that there's it's a trade-off, and one that I think needs to be thought about pretty hard.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, let's hear from the developers, the applicants. Mr. Kaplan, are you going to speak for the applicants? We can't hear you.
They have to wait 30 seconds.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry. The understanding of this technology is beyond my, it takes 30 seconds for us to unmute. So good morning and congratulations, Madam Secretary. It is pretty cool to be able to call you that. And all the new members of the siting board. My name is Andrew Kaplan, and with me this morning is Paul Connolly. We represent Cranberry Point Energy Storage and Medway Grid in the matters before the siting board. I want to, in addition to the chair and to the secretary, I also want to indicate my tremendous respect for the Energy Facility Siting Board staff and all of their hard work. I spent a lot of my career as a hearing officer at the DPU. I was also the general counsel and chief of staff at the DPU and worked closely on matters with the Energy Facility Siting Board, including on occasion acting as presiding officer at the EFSB. So I have tremendous respect for all of you. This morning, the company's really seeking assistance of the board to ensure that the 40A and Section 72 that were submitted to the DPU in May of 2021 and February of 2022 for Cranberry Point and Medway Grid respectively are issued imminently based on the significant evidentiary record already compiled in these matters without the need for a lot more regulatory process. To address some of the comments that Ms. Evans made, the jurisdictional issue is not actually raised solely by Cranberry Point and Medway Grid matters in the board, in the matters before the board today. In both the tentative decisions, there's a brief mention of docket EFSB 1901, and that docket, and that is what Ms. Evans also addressed this morning, but that's the docket that was filed in January 4th, 2019, and it was a request by Cranberry Point to the EFSB for jurisdictional determination, asking more than 4 years ago whether the EFSB would take jurisdiction over energy storage projects. And that request just went nowhere. At the time, the companies, after the February 8th, 2021, that was a date that the ISO New England selected these two projects to provide capacity by June of 2024, it was difficult to just wait for a decision as to whether or not there would be jurisdiction or not. We needed to know for sure. We could not begin construction if we thought there was a possibility of the EFSB taking jurisdiction. So we had pre-filing meetings with the EFSB. We sort of discussed what to do. We decided that we would withdraw the request for jurisdictional determination and file the two petitions with the EFSB. The jurisdiction was denied due to a strict constructionist statutory view that the 1973 EFSB enabling statute didn't mention energy storage resources. That is true. And therefore, the siting board determined that it has no jurisdictional authority. We understand that. I would note that the 1973 enabling statute didn't mention energy storage resources in 2019 when the EFSB was asked to make a jurisdiction decision. The 1973 enabling statute didn't mention energy storage resources in August 2021, when Cranberry Point filed its petition to the EFSB. The 1973 enabling statute didn't mention energy storage resources in February of 22, when Medway Grid filed their petition. The enabling statute didn't mention energy resources when the EFSB issued its notice announcing that it was reviewing the projects pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 164, 69J and a quarter. So if the EFSB is going to base its jurisdictional on nothing but language of the 1970 statute, it's unclear to me why the staff thinks that this is the right time to issue this decision. But be that as it may, we are where we're at. So as we explained to the EFSB numerous times in responses to information requests, to record requests during the hearings, we need to receive regulatory approval of these projects by June of 2023 if we're going to be able to provide capacity before the award deadline that ISO New England has mandated. The EFSB set forth a procedural schedule for Cranberry Point in August 2022, and it stated that the issuance of a final decision would likely be made in June of 2023 to meet the requirements of to begin construction on the project. Presiding Officer Shea issued a similar procedural schedule in November of 2022. So the companies have relied upon those schedules. We've assured ISO New England and the company's investors that Massachusetts will complete the process in June of 2023, and if approved, construction could commence shortly thereafter. But the viability of these projects is now in jeopardy, not necessarily because of the jurisdictional determination, but because there's uncertainty as whether the regulatory review of the 40A and 72 petitions can be issued in time to keep the projects viable, to reduce the chance that the companies will have tens of millions of dollars in penalties imposed against them, and to maintain the possibility that the Commonwealth can reach its goals of having 1,000 megawatts of energy storage by 2025. These two projects make 800 megawatt hours of energy storage by 2024. So you're not going to meet it if if these projects aren't approved with the 40A. I'm glad to hear that you're going to transfer the extensive evidentiary record over to the DPU. And I would hope that the DPU will issue its decision imminently so that these projects can move forward. Somebody had asked earlier whether or not EFSB oversight is a good thing or a bad thing. And I can't speak on behalf of the industry, but I can tell you that in our briefs and in our response that we filed last Friday, it is very difficult to have regulatory certainty when you need to go back to towns and you don't have any ability to override what the towns are doing. And many of the towns, I am in support of working with the towns, and both these companies have worked extensively with the towns. And I would certainly recommend that to any of the clients behind them that are ready to file for EFSB review or to build these projects in Massachusetts. But I will tell you, based on conversations I've had with companies that are behind these in line, it is going to be, the question as to whether to build in Massachusetts is really before you now, because it surprised me that in red states, which does have jurisdiction, in most of those states, the PUC or the EFSB has jurisdiction over these facilities, and they approve them quickly. It's here where I would think that we want, and you've stated that we need energy storage to be online by 2025. And we have goals for 2030 and 2050. And I'm sure the new administration and Secretary Tepper are going to have new goals. We cannot meet them if we don't have these projects have some kind of regulatory certainty as to the oversight. Folks are just going to go someplace else because they've spent already millions of dollars to try to propose a project that 4 years after they ask, do you have jurisdiction? The answer is, we don't have jurisdiction. And the timing is not great. The timing can be resolved if you issue the orders on 72 and 40A quickly. And if not, the projects are not viable. So that is our ask. I just wanted to stress that the timing, I do disagree respectfully rather, with the EFSB saying that the timing is right for this decision. It is not. The timing was right 4 years ago. However, I do want to stress that the 40A and the 72 need to be issued imminently. Thank you.
Mr. Kaplan, do you have anything else you want to say, or is that?
There was one question earlier, I think from, I don't recall who, on the status of the 40A for Cranberry Point. Do you want me to address that now, Madam Secretary?
Sure.
Okay, so last night at about 10 o'clock, the planning board in Carver approved the extension of the special permit and review process for 1 year. We still believe that the 40A is necessary because there's so much uncertainty in these town decisions and whether or not somebody's going to come in and implement new town bylaws and we've seen that is happening. I mean, moratoria are going into effect all over the place. Folks are trying to put in new bylaws to preclude battery energy storage without really understanding what battery storage is or does. So I think folks are understandably worried when you don't know about a product, what it entails, but I think there's enough information on the record in terms of safety and emissions to reassure folks that these projects are as safe as they can be, and they are in areas where they will be protected from. They're built in areas where folks are going to have, it will be minimal impact on butters. So I believe the 40A is still necessary for Cranberry Point, but that's the status. They did get the extension last night.
Thank you. Does anybody have questions for Mr. Kaplan? Yes, Chair.
And Mr. Kaplan, I thank you very much for your letter of May 5th. I spent some time looking at that and discussing it with the staff at the EFSB. When you say you want 48 and 72 orders issued imminently, what exactly do you mean by imminently? Give me some idea of the timeline involved in order to meet your obligations under the CSO obligation with ISO New England.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations on your new appointment.
Thank you.
It's a great agency. I can tell you that the reason we requested a June of 2023 issuance of the order is because projects had to be online by June of 2024 by our contract. And it is my understanding that it takes about a year to construct and test the systems for them to be operational by June 1st of 2024. So the reason that we asked for a June of 2023 issuance date was to ensure that we could begin construction and the process could be completed in time for us to be operational in June of 2024. So in terms of the request, I mean, the June of 2023 issuance date has not changed.
For the CSO, is that June 1 of 2024 or any time during the month of June of 2024?
June 1 of 2024.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Kaplan, does that mean you need to be able to provide generation on June 1, 2024?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, Commissioner Fraser, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question about the length of time it takes to construct the projects was answered. Thank you.
So I'll just comment very briefly on, I hear your frustration and I understand that frustration. We're a new board, so we are sort of where we are today. And understand that. And I just wanted to, be clear in terms of the administration's support for storage and the need for it. We understand the situation that we're in right now. And, you know, as I said, I'm hoping that this is the kind of thing that this commission can be reviewing. And welcome your thoughts on that. Anybody else? Questions for Mr. Kaplan? Okay, let's move on. So we will now hear from the interveners. We'll take the parties from Cranberry Point first.
Good morning, Secretary Tepper, members of the Siting Board. My name is Ryan Holmquist, and with me is Brian Bertram, and we are here on behalf of interveners Save the Pine Barrens. So first, Save the Pine Barrens wants to recognize, as has been discussed already, that the siting of a large battery energy storage system like this project is really an issue of first impression in these cases. Save the Pine Barrens commends the Siting Board on the comprehensiveness and thoughtfulness of the tentative decision. My comments will be fairly brief because for the following reasons, Save the Pine Barrens urges the Siting Board to approve the tentative decision as written as for Cranberry Point as the final decision. Crucially, the tentative decision is rooted in an understanding that the relevant siting statutes were adopted well before the legislature ever could have contemplated battery energy storage systems of the scale that the project at issue here is. While the legislature has since had the opportunity to amend the statutes to provide for a process for reviewing such facilities, it has not done so. Indeed, such jurisdiction should be conferred only after a careful deliberative process in the legislature, given the significant risks, both known and unknown, posed by battery energy storage systems. In addition to an understanding of the legislative context, the tentative decision provides a very well-reasoned textual analysis of the definition of generating facility to correctly conclude that the project does not meet this definition. For example, the definition of energy storage system in Chapter 164, Section 1 includes storing energy that was generated for use at a later time, and also substituting for an investment in generation assets. And so the tentative decision is really the only logical way to reconcile these definitions with energy storage systems. So for those reasons, and all of the reasons really that were included in the tentative decision, the finding that the Siting Board does not have jurisdiction is the only appropriate disposition of this matter, and Save the Pine Barrens urges adoption of the tentative decision in full. Thank you.
Does everyone have any questions? Mr. Bertram, did you want to provide some comments? I can't find you on my screen.
Other than
There you are. I see you now.
other than echoing my thanks along with everyone else to all of the hard work that was put into this case by EFSB staff and now by the full board, I have nothing to add to Ryan's comments. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Okay, Eversource, who's here for Eversource?
Hi, good morning.
Hello, Kathy. Oh, sorry.
Hi. Good morning.
Nice to see
I'm Catherine Cuthan from the law firm of Keegan Borland, and I'm here today appearing on behalf of NSTAR Electric Company doing business as Eversource. Eversource takes no position on the jurisdictional issue that is the subject of today's meeting. Eversource's interest is in the forthcoming DPU order on the zoning petition in the Cranberry Point proceeding, to the extent that we wish to ensure that the Eversource facilities are addressed by the department in that order. And the company Eversource stands ready to provide any additional information to the department if needed to make its determination. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we're going to hear from the parties from Medway Grid. Mr. Bernstein. Good morning.
Morning. Thank you very much, Secretary Tepper. Congratulations to you and all the new members of the Siting Board, and thank you in particular to the Siting Board staff for its hard work in this proceeding. The town does feel it's unfortunate at this hour, having gone through this process in good faith, to have it mooted by the decision that you're presumably about to render. We don't take a position on that. The town spent a considerable amount of time and resources negotiating a host community agreement tied into the Siting Board proceedings. And I think it applies with equal force to the DPU proceedings, which you're going to take up. And we would urge the department and parties participating in that to decide that as expeditiously as possible and to incorporate that host community agreement as we asked the Siting Board to incorporate the host community agreement conditions, which were negotiated given the limitations of what town can and can't regulate with respect to a project like this. So I'm going to turn it over to Town Manager Boynton briefly, but again, thank you. But the town of Medway had participated in a number of other Siting Board proceedings on more conventional generation and approached this project in the same fashion. And we hope that one way or another, everything can be concluded as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. Mr. Boynton?
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Good morning to everyone. And I would just echo what Attorney Bernstein said. Well, the town's not taking a specific position on the decision that's coming forward or proposed. I hearken back to something after almost 30 years, more than 30 years in this, thinking back to a time in the 90s when we were hearing about a type of construction that was coming along that was to potentially threaten the health and safety of folks, and needed immediate denials, if you will, and that was cell towers. Cell towers were a major issue for all of us in local government at the time. There were zoning enactments that were taking place across the Commonwealth in an effort to try to stop zoning cell towers from being placed. And finally, the FCC had had enough. It is exceptionally difficult to deal with zoning issues at a local government, especially at local government level, especially when you require a 2/3 vote. In the town of Medway right now, battery energy storage facilities are allowed by special permit strictly in the energy corridor, if you will, the energy zoning corridor. That is underneath the power lines. Medway, whether you look at it fortunately or unfortunately, is home to a major junction point of the grid across the Northeast systems. And we have both Eversource, New England Power, and National Grid lines that tie into our area. And this makes it a very attractive location for facilities such as Medway Grid to locate their facility. We have had extensive negotiations with Medway Grid. We did it all in accordance with the statute, accordance with law. We provided comments to the community, an opportunity for the community to comment. There are roughly 14,000 people in the town of Medway. We had less than 10 comments. And we answered many of the comments and doing what we could do to include in the host community agreement. We have taken some heat over that. Why is this important as it relates to the decision? Because it is a point for the EFSB and certainly for the Department of Public Utilities to understand that fixing things locally via zoning, again, is a very difficult process given the nature of what has to happen in an open town meeting. If that continues and there is no avenue for the development community to bring these types of facilities to the table through the EFSB process, then the administration's goal, the Commonwealth's goal of energy efficiency and energy resiliency is very much in doubt, because local zoning is a major challenge. We work with our communities. We appreciate the input of the members of our communities, but we also recognize that there are agendas that come to the table all the time. We're not making that case here, but clearly the parcel that is in question for the Medway Grid site is outside of that energy district. Any location to be considered outside or basically not underneath the power lines does not fall within the zoning allowance in the town of Medway. So that will create an issue for any company looking to come here if the only solution is to go through a rezone process at town meeting. That is more of a technical point. Again, I totally respect the work of the commission. I respect and understand the challenges related to the interpretation of the definition of generating, and recognize that that could very well end up at a SJC process, which would then seriously compromise the construction ability of any of these projects. And again, we recognize that there needs to be or recommend that there needs to be a joint effort and cooperation between the EFSB, the department, and our legislators to try to resolve this challenge. Much like happened 30 years ago or 25 years ago when cell towers were a major issue. They're different, but they're similar. Thank you very much.
Maybe we can get the federal government to jump in here too. They were the saviors on the cell towers. Okay. The enumerated part, Mr. Yorkis? Would you like to provide some comments? Might be frozen. Maybe someone wants to send a text or a message to him.
Mr. Yorkis, are you with us? We can't hear you. Could you unmute?
Can you hear me now?
We can, thank you. Go ahead. Shoot.
Mr. Yorkis, we are having trouble hearing you. It looks like there may be a connection problem. You may want to try to do your comments by phone. Mr. Yorkis, can you hear me?
Remark. Profound. Can you hear me okay now?
Not really. You're really breaking up pretty badly.
Maybe try taking
you hear
your
me?
camera off. That might help. You're muted again. Looks
Can
like
you hear me now?
Your picture's frozen, but we can hear you now.
You may want to turn off any other programs, shut
great.
down any other
Thank
programs
you.
that's going on besides Zoom.
The camera in particular, that takes a lot of bandwidth. So if we can just have your audio, then we'll get your comments.
All right, so let me turn off my camera. Stop video. Can you hear me all right now? Hello?
Yes. Let's give it a try.
Can you hear me?
You're chopping up a little bit.
Okay, I'm gonna send Mr. Yorkis the dial-in information, so perhaps a phone connection might be the way to get his comments, and perhaps we can circle back and get those as soon as possible, and perhaps move on to our next scheduled commenters, Secretary.
So Eversource is also an intervener in Medway Grid. Mr. Kohler, did you want to speak?
Hi, Secretary Tepper. Yes, I'm Mike Kaler from Keegan Worland on behalf of Eversource in this docket. I'll speak slowly to give Mr. Yorkis some time to reconnect. But on the legal issue, Eversource takes no position on the legal issue at this time, and Eversource will continue to work with Medway Grid to on the specifics of the interconnection, and looks forward to doing so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Should we move on to try the limited participants?
Yes, I'm sending the information to
Okay.
Mr. Yorkis.
All right. We'll hear from Cranberry Point first, and there were some limited participants that were pre-registered to speak. Is Mary Dormer on the line?
Yes, she is. I'm going to promote her to the panel right now.
Great, thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Ms. Dormer, we can.
Hi.
Thank
First
you
of all,
for joining us.
thanks. I would like to thank the board for all of your hard work in coming to this decision, and I urge you, as a resident of Carver, to confirm the ruling that you do not have legal authority over Cranberry Point. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Who's up? Let's see. Sorry, I haven't done too many meetings. I actually had to go back and look at Robert's Rules of Order yesterday. But Daniel Farini, are you on the phone? You can
He's on the
unmute.
panel now. Yeah.
If you, there you go. Can we?
Morning.
Good morning.
Hi. Good morning. My name is, first I'd like to thank everyone for allowing me to speak as a citizen of Massachusetts. My name is Dan Farini. I live 1,500 feet from the proposed development. Just to let you know, I have over 40 years of electrical experience, have degrees in electrical engineering. I've listened to the hearings, been part of the hearings, and done a lot of study on battery storage. First off, this proposed development has nothing to do with renewable energy. It does not connect to any solar fields. It will not connect directly to any renewable energy at all. In fact, it will be connected to the grid. And listening to Cranberry Point's engineers and during multiple hearings, the battery will be powered at night when renewable energy is off the grid. It will be powered up by coal power. And then during the day, it will come back online. When it comes back online, it will be competing with our renewable energy resources at that time. So it does not generate electricity, and therefore I am urging the board to confirm the ruling that you do not have legal authority over the Cranberry Point. And thank you for allowing me to speak today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from the Medway Grid Limited participants. Is Mr. Myers on the phone?
I've promoted Mr. Myers.
Mr. Myers, good morning. You want to unmute yourself.
Okay. I want to thank you, Secretary Tepper, and the board for the opportunity as a limited participant in the Medway Grid petition to offer comments at today's hearings. The battery energy storage process really makes BESS a net consumer of energy and therefore not a generator. The U.S. Energy Information Administration, EIA, notes the average BESS efficiency is 82%. In another report, EIA goes on to say that batteries are not standalone generation sources and must procure electricity supplied by generators to recharge and cover the round-trip efficiency losses they have during the cycles of charging and discharging, end quote. The net result is that the charging load a BESS requires is higher than the energy being returned to the grid, making a BESS a net energy user and not a generator. Energy losses manifest themselves, 1, by creating heat, 2, by requiring fans to remove the heat, and 3, by generating noise. Governor Baker did set an energy storage goal. He did so to capture renewable energy for use during peak periods to offset fossil generation. Unfortunately, he did not require that storage be linked to renewable resources. This allows BESS systems to draw power from the grid during darkness using fossil resources, which, with their higher loads will cause the grid to generate increased levels of emissions higher than they otherwise would have done due to the energy efficiency losses. EFSB had the opportunity to review this new technology using 2 BESS projects. Based on that careful and thoughtful review, they determined that energy storage was not energy generation. I agree with that determination. The EFSB has been the siting resource for DPU for over 40 years. A determination by the EFSB that energy storage is not within their jurisdiction should be honored by the DPU, and further review of BESS projects by the DPU should not be undertaken. Cities and towns in Massachusetts have for years now seen the installation of residential, industrial, and municipal utility battery energy storage systems. There are codes and standards in place now for BESS installations. As there are mechanisms and resources within towns and cities now to be able to process the siting in such a way that the overall Massachusetts energy storage goals can still be met without the involvement of the EFSB or the DPU. I want to thank you for the opportunity to offer my comments.
Thank you very much. Mr. Yorkis, maybe we can go back to you.
And before he tries to comment, I did send you an email, Mr. Yorkis, with the dial-in information. So if this is not successful, please call us on a phone and use the information in the email. You're muted.
Unmute yourself.
I'm not sure what's going on with Dr. Yorkis. So I hope he receives the email that I sent with the information and he can join us and comment as a dial-in.
Can you hear me now? Hello? Hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
No, it's not going to work. So please try dialing in on the instructions from the email that you should have received. Did you get one?
I think he might have them both on now. So why don't I see, is there any other people who have registered to speak or who would like to speak this morning? Ms. Conley, is that how you pronounce your name? You want to unmute yourself, we can hear your comments.
Oh, there we go. Hello, can you hear me? Sorry, I thought I unmuted, but I guess
No
I did.
worries. You're good.
My name's, oh, sorry, go ahead. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, cool. My name's Patty Cootie. I'm a lifelong resident of Carver. And I also just wanted to thank you folks for, putting all the time and effort into looking at all the information presented to you and, trying to help out our town of Carver. And I just want to say that I urge you also to uphold your decision as far as, what you said, that you guys don't really have jurisdiction over this. And just to, uphold the decision and let the proper, people deal with it. So you guys all seem very aware of what's going on, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you for joining us this morning. I will note for the record that we have received written comments on the tentative decision from one entity, which is New Leaf Energy. Are there other members of the public that would like to comment?
Secretary Tepper, one of the registered commenters, Karen Lapham, is dialed in, so I'm going to allow her to speak on her phone.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Second. Ms. Lapham, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, thank you very much. I also am a lifelong resident of Carver. I live within 3,000 feet of this project. Also, again, would like to urge the board that your ruling that
You could speak up just a little bit.
I apologize. I also am a lifelong resident of Carver. Project is within 3,000 feet of my home. I also would like to confirm the ruling with the board, so you don't have legal authority over this. And I do appreciate your time and your efforts for all of this project. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Secretary.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Secretary Tepper, I think I found Mr. Yorkis's phone number in the attendees too, so I'm going to allow that number to speak and see if it works.
Okay, great. Mr. Yorkis, maybe you can unmute yourself and we can hear from you. You just need to unmute yourself. Okay. Do we have anybody else who's waiting to talk?
There's one more person registered to speak, Holly Agnew. I don't see her right now.
Ms. Agnew, if you are here.
If you're here, Ms. Agnew, could you raise your hand?
Okay. Sure. Mr. Yorkis. If you are on the phone, you could unmute yourself and I think we'll be able to hear you. Well, why don't we move ahead?
Can I just, one last attempt for Dr.
Yes.
Yorkis? If he's on, dial star and then 9 on your phone keypad, and we will see your hand raised on the screen. There's only one person right now who has their hand raised, and it does not appear to be you. So please do that, and then we can recognize you. Otherwise, we will not be able to.
So he has to do star 9 on the phone.
Yes, on
Okay.
his phone.
He's dropped off his phone number's dropped off now, so I don't know that he got the message.
By any chance, did he provide any written comments? No.
Not on the tentative decision.
Well, what do you recommend, Ms. Evans? What do you recommend we do from here?
Is there, I'm wondering whether Wayne or Andy, can you call Mr. Yorkis? Would it work if we call him?
Put him on speaker.
And put him on speaker to allow him to speak if someone has his number? Or maybe Mr. Shea has his number?
I do have Mr. Yorkis's number. I can call if you want.
Yep, let's try.
Let's try it. Yes.
Okay, here we go.
Hopefully we won't get a lot of feedback.
Yeah, I hope not. Mr. Yorkis, I'm participating in the hearing, and we're going to try to get you in with the speaker. Can you speak up?
Can you put him on speakerphone and raise the volume?
Speakerphone, Bob?
Let's see if I can put him on speakerphone. Oh, wait a second. Let me see. Okay, Mr. Yorkis?
Yes.
Good.
How's it?
Okay.
We can hear you, sir.
Thank you very much. I apologize. I'm in a hotel and I apologize that the technology isn't as good as I would like it to be. Members of the EFSB, thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you on behalf of the Medway Enumerated Parties, MEP, regarding the Medway grid application. Before I begin the formal part of what I want to say, I do want to extend my sincere thanks to all the staff of the EFSB, as well as the folks from Medway Grid and the other interveners. I truly feel that it's been an incredibly professional and respectful process, and I appreciate it a great deal. I have read the draft recommendation prepared by the EFSB staff. I was and still am, and still is MEP's position that the law as currently written does not give the EFSB the authority to review battery energy storage applications. We agree with the draft decision and hope that the EFSB adopts the tentative decision as presented by Presiding Officer Shea on April 26, 2023. There are 6 points that I would like to share with you. First, that MEP does not oppose best technology. That position has been stated during the hearing process. Second, that the town of Medway has a zoning district that contains vacant land that permits a BESS facility. Medway Grid made a conscious decision not to seek approval for a facility in an existing properly zoned area because allegedly vacant land under the control of Eversource was not available for development. Permits could have been sought that did not require EFSB intervention had an agreement been reached with Eversource. Third, we agree that best technology, battery energy storage, is not energy generation. Fourth, in their letter to you regarding the tentative decision, Medway Grid states ongoing regulatory delays will result in the termination of both capacity contracts for failure to deliver capacity within the contractual deadline, tens of millions of dollars in punitive damages for the companies, and no energy storage in the Commonwealth for the foreseeable future. Medway Grid made a business decision to build a facility based upon an unrealistic timetable they themselves established for a facility in Medway. Medway Grid made a business decision to interpret the law in an incorrect manner. The potential for Medway Grid to face punitive damages is the consequences of poor business decisions. That is not the responsibility of the Energy Facility Siting Board. Fifth, Medway Grid had approval from ISO New England for 3 different sites, one of which is located in Medway. No evidence was introduced by Medway Grid regarding the suitability of the other 2 sites and whether or not the other 2 sites could be developed without EFSB intervention. Sixth and finally, should the EFSB adopt the tentative decision, and if the Department of Utilities, the Department of Public Utilities determines that it will assume responsibility for the review of a Medway Grid application. For the record, it is MEP's request that the DPU must conduct a new set of hearings so that the members of the DPU, all of whom are new, have a full and complete understanding of all of the issues relating to the Medway Grid proposal. Thank you for your consideration. and I would be happy to respond to any of your questions.
Thank you very much, sir. That was very helpful. Glad that we were able to fix the problem.
Thank you. I'm glad also.
All right. Anybody else? Okay. So,
Excuse me, we do have a couple of hands raised.
Oh, we do?
And we can hear from those people if you'd like.
Okay, I cannot see them. So
we have Tina Pugliese Savage, and we'll move her to the panel. I believe she's a public commenter.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. You are on.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to pull up a document that I wanted to read, so I didn't waste your time. I wrote out what I wanted to read, if I may.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Good morning, Secretary Tupper, sitting board members, and concerned parties. My name is Tina Pugliese Savage, and I reside in Millbury, Massachusetts. I'm sitting at home in my living room right now with a number of other Millbury town residents. First, we'd like to thank you for this meeting, the transparency of making it available by Zoom so that we could attend. And we appreciate your careful consideration that you're giving to BESS. Currently, the town of Millbury is finding itself faced with the same challenges or similar challenges as Medway. A landowner at 55 Sycamore Street in Millbury, Massachusetts, whose land is heavily populated in a heavily populated residential neighborhood, but is technically zoned as business 2, contacted a company to lease his land to erect a 5-megawatt lithium battery storage system that will be less than 250 feet from family homes. The company has a number of solar sites, but this would be their first BESS facility. It would also be, to my knowledge and my researches, Millbury's first BESS facility. Furthermore, this site is within feet of an environmental justice population and a protected water source, which is the Blackstone River, I'm sure you're very familiar with. Senator Michael Moore met with our 55 Sycamore neighborhood group and forwarded this information about the about the EJP and the protected water source to the Environmental Protection Agency in Boston, noting the two issues and the fact that they automatically flag a full MEPA review. The Millbury Planning Board met May 9th last night and at present has not heard back from the Mass EPA regarding the initiation of a MEPA. So that issue is pending. Thank you. I only have a bit more and I understand I have a 3-minute time limit. According to Millbury zoning laws, business 2 is permitted for a utility. The applicant of the company proposed this project for this project is not, I repeat, is not a registered member of DPU. So we as a neighborhood group are understanding that it is not a utility, quote unquote. Our neighborhood group believes that the Millbury Planning Board, who met on this topic on Monday evening, should have denied the project, but they didn't. Instead, they issued a continuance because of your pivotal meeting. So today, people in the neighborhood are extremely concerned, first about the proximity of the BESS in our residential neighborhood, possible hazards, and the lack of state classification of a BESS. Will the decision that you made today prevent this BESS from being airdropped in our residential neighborhood? If not, am I as a citizen able to make a motion that the sitting board determine a ruling that restricts BESSes from being airdropped into residential neighborhoods close to protected water sources, community parks, schools, churches, or other heavily residential areas? And I thank you for your attention, your time, and I'm going to turn off on mute so that you can respond. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. I guess I don't know anything about your particular situation, and we're dealing with a different matter today. I will say just in general that a facility that is under 100 megawatts wouldn't be jurisdictional to the siting board. If I'm missing something, siting board staff, please say.
You are correct.
Okay. Anybody else?
We're not seeing any additional hands raised at this time, Secretary.
Okay, so we've heard the presentations and the comments, and we have looked at the Cranberry Point and Medway Grid jointly because of the common jurisdictional question and the desire to hear from all the commentators before we begin deliberations. But for clarity and procedure, we're going to deliberate each matter separately, and we're going to start with Cranberry Point. And to begin the deliberations for Cranberry Point, we do need a motion. Do I have a motion to adopt the tentative decision for Cranberry Point?
So moved.
Ms. Mahaney. Do I have a second?
Second, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The Chair Nordstrom. Okay, so the motion is second, and we're going to leave the motion on the floor and vote on it at the end of deliberation. So we can now have a discussion. The board will now have a discussion and consider if there are any amendments from the board. So are there any board members that would like to talk? Commissioner Mahaney.
Thanks. I'll just speak briefly. I'm not going to. I'll just start by saying I have concerns with how we're going to deal with and treat the siting of storage in the future. We've got to work this out. Although I will say that I'm not going to disagree with the recommendations in this draft decision, the tentative decision. I think that we are in a bit of a bind with respect to the statutory language and how what's available for the board to determine, interpret the statutory language that we are considering. But I will say that I'm a bit frustrated that we are making this decision at this point and that something didn't happen sooner. We are in a climate crisis. We need to address the siting of clean energy, and we need to help communities with siting those facilities, including storage of a variety of types. I think that at this point, we are forcing the issue, and hopefully the legislature will pay attention. I just am, again, frustrated that it's come to this and that it's taken this long. But I am grateful with the Secretary's decision to open the Commission on Permitting and Siting. I think that will be very helpful. I think these decisions today will be helpful in signaling to the legislature that we need to update our legislation. I just wish it had happened sooner. So I'm not objecting to the tentative decision. I am frustrated by the repeated references to the legislature not doing anything about it, because it turns out a lot of us didn't do anything about it. So we'll take the time now, and I look forward to working with the Secretary's Commission to make improvements in the future.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ms. Johnson.
Yes, thank you. My comments will be brief also, and they echo what was stated. I value having to meet our clean energy goals and the role of storage. Just very concerned then that we're in the situation where there hasn't been discussion about open space protection. And again, the siting, particularly in relation to, you can imagine residential and again, open space, and here we are. And so I guess more of a comment rather than a question, but it is a complicated issue. And just concerned about how to move forward to ensure legislation does look at how to balance this, or what efforts we can also do, because it'll come up again, and don't want to be pushed into a corner regarding our clean energy goals, energy storage versus the siting locations and other factors. Thank you.
Who else would like to comment? Or ask questions, or I'll say that I think this is a unsatisfying situation. I think for many people, I think it's a hard decision to make, and I think ultimately a one that should be made by the legislature. But to address Ms. Johnson's point, I do think that we are striving to have a broad range of stakeholders on this commission to talk about issues just like what you're talking about, the very sort of hard questions about how we're going to balance land use, equity, how we're going to balance that with building large energy infrastructure and making sure that it's in the right place. And yeah, I think there's just a lot of really hard questions, and I do think it's going to take a bit of time to walk through and think through. And I think having people in a room who are devoted to thinking about this, I do think will hopefully not put us in this situation again. Anybody else? Okay.
Are there any proposed amendments along the lines of the comments that have been made or yet to be made? Staff did not put forward a proposed amendment sheet. We really didn't have anything specific.
I think it's pretty hard to amend a jurisdictional decision. It sort of is or it isn't. So I think that's where we are. And I think the proposal to send the zoning board matter back to the DPU is the way that what the statute contemplates. If a DP for them to consider a zoning board petition. I think we all heard the urgency associated with that, and I know that there are two commissioners here in the meeting who heard it as well. So I think then we will move forward with a roll call vote on the motion.
Would you like me to call the roll, Secretary?
Secretary is frozen right now.
All right, sorry about that. My whole system just shut off. Commissioner Fraser, you have a comment?
I just had a quick question, Madam Chair, if Andy or yourself could just repeat. The main motion is to adopt the tentative decision, correct?
That's correct, for Cranberry Point.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. So that motion then is before us. Oh, my Lord, have mercy. All right, I'm just going to talk and I'll figure that out in a minute. So can we do a roll call vote? Andy, can you do a roll call vote?
Yes. Chair Van Nostrand,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Frazier,
Aye.
Commissioner Mahini,
Aye.
Commissioner Heipel, Commissioner Heipel, you're on mute. Didn't hear you, but I think I heard what you said. Or it sounded like an aye. Is she on?
Maybe if it is an aye, maybe you could give us a thumbs up
Thumbs up.
so we could see.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Now we hear you. Commissioner
Oh.
Heipel. Okay.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. General Counsel Costco,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Can you repeat the full vote just one more time?
the motion is to approve the tentative decision
It's so hard.
for Cranberry Point.
Right. Yes. Aye.
Thank you. And Mr. Casey,
Aye.
Chair Tepper.
Aye. So
The
now,
the
sorry,
motion
go ahead.
carries. It's a unanimous vote.
Thank you. All right, with that vote, we're going to move on to the final decision for Medway Grid. So again, we will need a motion. So do I have a motion to adopt the tentative decision for Medway Grid?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. Do I have a second?
Second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Costco. All right, so the motion is seconded and we'll again leave the motion on the floor to see if we have any deliberations on the motion. I think given that it's the same jurisdictional question, I don't have anything more to say about it. Does anybody else? Any amendments? Okay. All right, can we do a roll call vote on the motion then, please?
Yes. Chair Van Nostrand,
Aye.
Commissioner Fraser,
Aye.
Commissioner Mahini,
Aye.
Commissioner Heipel,
Aye.
General Counsel Costco,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Casey,
Aye.
and Chair Tepper.
Aye,
Motion carries.
thank you. Before we adjourn, is there any other matters that board members would like to discuss? Okay. Hearing none, then I move to join the meeting, adjourn the meeting. Can we?
Yes, we need a roll call vote to do that, surprisingly. So if
Yep.
I may,
You may.
Chair Van Nostrand,
Aye.
Commissioner Fraser,
Aye.
Commissioner Mahini,
Aye.
Commissioner Heipel,
Aye.
General Counsel Costco,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Casey,
Aye.
and Chair Tepper.
Aye. So thank you very much. The motion carries. And I just want to thank everybody on the board. We're looking forward to working with all of you. And hopefully we can take on this difficult job and do the best we can. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Congratulations, Chair Tepper, on your
Thank you very
appointment.
much. Thank you, Mr. Casey. All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for attending. Goodbye.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We are off the record.